Okay, Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. We are going to resume Gemara Rosh Hashana. Where we left off is in this famous discussion that we have in our Mishnah. It's worth repeating our Mishnah outside very briefly. B'chavod, shalom aleichem, Erev Tov. So we're going to repeat what we said in our Mishnah because tonight we're going to continue with that topic. Our Mishnah is all about what? The one topic we're talking about is Rosh Hashana shechal liyot b'Shabbat. When Rosh Hashana falls on Shabbat, what do we do with shofar? We had this whole discussion last time, and we concluded in our Gemara that the Mishnah tells us, "B'mikdash hayu tok'in aval lo b'medina." They would blow the Mikdash in Yerushalayim. They would blow the shofar in Yerushalayim, but not outside. Why not? Can anyone remind me why don't we blow the shofar outside of Yerushalayim? It's called Gezerah de Rabbah. Rabbah tells us that there is a Gezerah. Shema ya'avirenu arba amot b'reshut rabim. You might come to carry the shofar publicly. Okay, so why didn't they blow the shofar outside of Yerushalayim? Because they were concerned that people will go carry it. Inside Yerushalayim, that's where the Beit Din Hagadol was. That's where the Sanhedrin was. There's an expectation that people who are around the high court are not going to come to make a silly mistake, like start carrying on Shabbat. But you have random people in random cities, they might. Okay? So Rosh Hashana that falls on Shabbat, they wouldn't blow the shofar. That's what we said outside of the Beit HaMikdash. But then we had, after the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, we had a rabbi who was the head of the court. What was his name? Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Very good. He was the Nasi. He was the president. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, it says Hitkin. He made a takana that they would blow the shofar in Yavneh, and it's a machloket whether it would be outside of Yavneh and places of other Beit Din also. Okay, this is what we had in our Mishnah. That our Mishnah said machloket whether it was only Yavneh or it was Yavneh and other places. And how he even got Yavneh as a whole, he pulled the shtick. Remember, we said how he came and he told them, let's blow the shofar. They said, well, let's talk about it. He says, let's blow it, then we'll talk about it. Then they blew the shofar. He said, so let's talk about it. He said, we already did it. What's there to talk about? It was a very, very nice trick. We spoke about how he was allowed to do that, how he did it. It was proper, it was correct. I read some other commentators afterwards that didn't like the idea that he did the trick. So they said, no, really? He was talking about something else. Okay, so this whole thing, because some people didn't like the fact that he did this, so the commentators explain it differently. But here is, tonight we're going to say that when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana, when he made a takana, the Mishnah is going to tells us this line, and this line is important, and then after I say this, we're going to get into it. The Mishnah says, there's one more thing that Yerushalayim had better or higher than Yavneh. That when it was in Yerushalayim, they would blow the shofar in all of the surrounding cities too. If you could hear it, if you could see it, if you could get close to it, in the surrounding cities too. But in Yavneh, it was only in Yavneh. Okay? So when the Mishnah says, there's one more thing that Yerushalayim has a one-up, is one better than Yavneh, the fact that surrounding cities would blow the shofar also on Shabbat, the Mishnah was interested to say, well, what's the first thing? When you're telling me there's one more thing. And that, we're going to get into the discussion based on a statement of Rav Huna. Okay? So hopefully that was a good recap. We're going to get started now. We're going to read Rav Huna. We're going to say there's two ways of understanding Rav Huna. And here we go. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is we're going to pick up from the last line of 29b. So if you're looking at the art scroll, it's literally the last line of 29b4. I'm going to share my screen. What? I'm already recording, right? Yes. Share screen. Okay, here we go. Amru lo. They said to him, remember, it was a machloket. It was a machloket as to whether Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made the takana in Yavneh only, or in Yavneh and other places with the Beit Din. Amru lo, echad Yavneh ve'echad kol makom sheyesh bo Beit Din. They responded to Rabbi Elazar and said, Yavneh and anywhere where there's a court, Yavneh and anywhere where there's a Beit Din, there would be blowing the shofar on Shabbat. Not only Yavneh, but also places of Beit Din. Amar Rav Huna. We have the statement of Rav Huna. Ve'im Bet Din. with the court. Okay, everyone has to know the statement of Rav Huna. Rav Huna says this cryptic statement, and it's attached to something that comes before it. He's giving what you call a qualifying statement. He's saying something that is explaining another statement. What did Rav Huna say? With the betin. Okay? With the betin. What you just said before, with the betin. Okay, so now we have to see, what was he talking about? What was he commenting on? Right? This is like if you're looking at WhatsApp, and hopefully he replied to a comment, so you know which comment he replied to. Now you understand the context. Okay, so Rav Huna said a statement without replying. We're not exactly sure which statement he's replying to, and there's machloket, but this is what his statement was with the betin. Okay, what was he talking about? You know what? Just let me show you this line. I'm just going to scroll up for a second. Go back to the Mishnah. Here it is. Let's just do this one more time. We read it. We did it, but I'm just going to read you the Mishnah inside very quickly. Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashana shechal yom Shabbat. Right? Rosh Hashana falls on Shabbat. B'mikdash hayu tokin. They would blow the shofar in the Beit Hamikdash. Aval lo b'Medina. They wouldn't do it outside of the Beit Hamikdash. Or according to the Rambam, which we're going to go with, they would blow the shofar in Jerusalem, but they wouldn't do it outside of Jerusalem. Mishachara Beit Hamikdash. But after the Beit Hamikdash was destroyed, and the court, the High Court, Supreme Court, moved from the Beit Hamikdash to Yavneh, Hitkin Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai, sheitokin b'chol makom sheyesh bo beit din. Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai now made a takana that they would blow the shofar anywhere where there was a court. He wanted people not to forget, even though the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. So he said on Shabbat, we're going to blow the shofar anywhere where there's a court. Amar Rabbi Elazar says to him, no hitkin Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai, ela b'Yavneh bilvad. Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai only decreed that we'd blow the shofar in Yavneh. That's it. Amrulo, they respond to him, echad Yavneh v'echad kol makom sheyesh bo beit din. No, not just Yavneh. Yavneh and anywhere there was a court. Okay, Yavneh and anywhere there was a court, they would blow the shofar. So what happened is, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, they would start blowing the shofar, not in Jerusalem, but in Yavneh, plus other places. Okay? This is what I was talking about before. Zot haita Yerushalayim mitra al Yavneh. And this is one more thing that Yerushalayim was superior over Yavneh. She called Ir Shehiroah, because when Yerushalayim they blew the shofar, it wasn't just Yerushalayim. It was also any city that could see it, Bishomat that could hear it, Krova that's close to Yecholah Lavon could come there on Shabbat. Took in. They also blow the shofar on Shabbat. But in the city of Yavneh, it was only in front of the Beit Din. It was only with the Beit Din. Okay? So with that statement in mind, now let's go back to Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna tells us the last line of the daf, Ve'im Beit Din, together with the court. The Gemara says, My Ve'im Beit Din. When you say together with the court, what are you talking about? Bifnei Beit Din. It means in the presence of the court. Coming to exclude that you couldn't do it not in front of the Beit Din. Okay? So I just turned the page to 30, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. Rav Huna is saying, you know how Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that you could blow the shofar in Yavneh? What he said is, it has to be in front of the court. It's not just at the court physically. You know, this is like someone goes to the courthouse when the court is closed. The court is not open all the time. The court has business hours, or when the court is in session. Does anyone know the Beit Din what hours it's in session? Until chatzot, until midday. So they start in the morning and they go until midday. So the Gemara tells us. The Dayanim would have this whole process. They would pray very early. They would pray on nets. Afterwards, they would sit. They would start judging cases. They would go straight for 5 to 6 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, depending on what it is. And then they would have their breakfast. So then they wouldn't take new cases anymore. If there was a case that was extending, fine, they would extend. But otherwise, until chatzot, until midday, that's when they dealt with the case. Okay? So now, what this is telling us is, Ve'im Beit Din means in front of the court. Let me just show this to you outside. Okay? Rav Huna's statement, I'm just going to enlarge this for a second. Rav Huna's statement, don't look at the bottom. The shofar blowing must be Ve'im Beit Din, with the court. What does Rav Huna mean when he says with the court? I'll give you two options. Option number one, with the court means in the presence of the Beit Din. Meaning, you can't just do it at the court if the court is not in without the Beit Din there. You have to be there in front of them. The other one says no, it's during the time that the Beit Din is in session, which is the first 6 hours of the day. But you don't have to be at the court. Meaning, Ve'im Beit Din means during the court hours. Okay, you get it? Rav Huna is telling us that when you blow the shofar, it has to be, meaning on Shabbat, in Yavneh, it has to be with the court. What does that mean? Option 1, in front of the court. Option 2, anywhere, even in your bedroom. No, in front of the judges, the members of the court. Yeah, in the presence of the.
They're there. Does that mean they're in session on Shabbat? No problem.
They're not in session because it's Shabbat. On Shabbat, the courts are not in session. But on Shabbat, Rosh Hashana, they are in session. For one purpose only, blowing the shofar. That's all. They're there on that day to blow the shofar. And when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that you blow the shofar, keep in mind, you don't blow the shofar in other cities or in places where there's no court. Why is it that when there's a court, you're allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbat? Why don't we blow the shofar on Shabbat? So you don't come to carry. But if I tell you when you're standing in front of the court, you're allowed to blow the shofar, then you're not going to come to carry. Because it's done in a way of expertise. You don't go to your neighbor and say, hey, Ralph, how do I blow the shofar? Because you just show up to the court, right? You just come to Kanisa, if you will. But it's not any Kanisa, it's a specific one. So this is what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai tells us, is that he made a takana, it's done in front of the court. That there's nothing to argue about. You argue whether it was every court or just the court in Yavneh. But there's nothing to argue about that it was by the court. But the question is, so the city of Yavneh has a court. Does that mean I have to go physically stand in front of the members of the court? Or does that mean I could do it outside in my own home, since as long as they're in the city? Does it mean I could do it outside in the street? Well, definitely not in the streets. Not in the courthouse, because then you would come to carry. But can I do it in my own house? Get it? This is Rav Huna's statement. Okay? I feel like it's a little bit confusing. Can anyone remind me, what does Rav Huna say? Tell me, what does Rav Huna say? What is the statement of Rav Huna? Just 3 words. The im bedin, together with the court. What does that mean? What is he saying?
Im bedin is like together with it. Say inside.
Okay. Im bedin means with the court. Exactly. Now there's going to be machloket as to what this means. So one of them means you're in front of them, you're together with them. The other one is during the court hours, but you don't have to be in the same room as them. It's just during the court hours, together with them while they are in session, quote unquote. Right?
Aren't these two, would they have to be linked together? I don't understand.
No, I could do it at my bedroom at 8 a.m. I could do it at my bedroom at 2 p.m. Okay? So if you tell me that it's just while the court is in session, doing it at 8 a.m. in my bedroom is fine. I'm not in the presence of the court, but I'm during the court hours. Meaning, when he says it's a requirement that you have to do it with the court, it's possible he's just giving you a time. It has to be done in the first half of the day.
Oh, so not court hours while he would just say just do it in the first half of the day. Why would he say you have to do it with the court if it doesn't have to be?
Because why does it have to be in the first half of the day? Because the court's in session then, and it was established with the court. So he's saying, so you have to do it during the court hours. The whole thing that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai allowed is to do it when there's a court, where there's a court. So you don't have to do it in front of them, according to that opinion, but you have to do it when they're open. If they're not open, then what difference does it make? 4 p.m., there's no difference between if there's a court here or not. There's no court.
I have a
court. Doesn't it automatically imply that it has to be when they're in session?
That's one of the 2 opinions. It doesn't say in the presence of the court. It says with the court. So what do you mean with the court? One option is in the presence of the court. The other option is during court hours.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
If you do it during hours, if you're authorizing anyone at any point just to do it at that time, isn't that
correct?
Problem again?
Correct. Sorry, Mr. Zerbabeli, I hear you. Just
whenever you have a time.
And then I'll come back to you. So yes, so you're saying how according to the opinion that says in front of them, then it makes sense. Because normally we don't want you to blow shofar in Rosh Hashanah because you may come to carry. But if you're in front of the court, you're not going to come to carry. I understand why you would make that the requirement, to be in front of them. But if you're going to tell me that it's just during those hours, then how does, you're basically saying, what is that? Why am I not scared he's going to carry?
Yeah.
So basically what we're saying is during those hours in your own home, you're not allowed to walk. But since you are in the city where there is the Sanhedrin Agadol, the big one, or even just a Sanhedrin, you are close by to it, and you're doing it during these hours, and you know you're doing it during these hours, because that's the time that the court is open, in your mind there's enough of a connection that I'm not going to come to carry. That's why you have to do it during these hours. Why during those hours? Because that's when the court's in session. Okay, that's going to be enough of a reminder for you not to carry, to think about the court. It sounds like in front of them, it sounds like it's a better a deterrent to come to carry. But this is what that second opinion is going to say. How just telling me that I have to do it during the Beit Din hours, meaning I have to do it while the court is in session, even though I'm not at the court, it just gets me thinking, make sure not to come to carry. 1 second, Mr. Zavarelli had a question. Yes.
My question was, you're talking about Shabbat, so the court is in session on Shabbat?
Yes, excellent question. So here, let me just, I think this might be better. Can you speak one more time?
I'm asking you're talking about Shabbat, so how could the court be in session on Shabbat? They were working on Shabbat?
Okay, Mr. Zavarelli has an excellent question, and we said it very, very quickly here. Why would the court even be in session on Shabbat? The answer is, you're absolutely correct. The courts are never in session on Shabbat, but they convene and they come together not to judge cases. They don't judge cases, but they come on Rosh Hashana.
Or just to hear the shofar?
Yes, there's actually two reasons why the court is together on this day. One reason is just for the shofar. The other is, if you recall, we've spoken about this, that it's supposed to be Rosh Chodesh, and the Supreme Court is always getting ready to accept testimony even on Shabbat.
Oh, yeah.
Even on Shabbat, when it's to be Rosh Chodesh. Remember, we had all of this discussion of what happens if you are a Friday night and you see the moon. You have to go and you could break Shabbat, and you could go and you could give your testimony that day. And then what would they do? There was a big buffet. They had a ton of food there for them on Shabbat, because once you're there, you can't go home. Anyone remember the name of the ballroom, the courtyard? No. Bet Yazek Shema. It was a machoket whether it's Yazek with an ayin or Yazek without an ayin. But they would put poppers there. They would put bravas. They had like a hamotzi station. Why? Because they wanted people to come. And then one Friday night, we said this whole story. One Friday night, people were traveling, and then Rabbi Akiva came and he saw them. Or they said it wasn't Rabbi Akiva. It was actually the mayor of the town. And he said, "What are you guys going? Enough. There's been 40 people that already went. You don't need to keep going." And then Rabban Gamliel came to him tomorrow, gave him a phone call. He said, "If you ever dare tell a witness not to come again, I'm going to, I don't even want to tell you what I'm going to do." This Rabban Gamliel came and he told him, it wasn't Rabbi Akiva. The second opinion of the Gemara says it couldn't be Chas v'Shalom. Rabbi Akiva would deter witnesses from coming. But you see that when it's Rosh Chodesh, the court is in session. So you're absolutely correct, Mr. Zavarelli. They don't deal with monetary cases. They don't deal with civil cases. They don't deal with capital crime. But for Rosh Chodesh, it's a different case. We're talking about the court is open, Sanhedrin is open, because they want to, number one, get the testimony at it's Rosh Hashana, and number two, they're there to blow the shofar. It's a unique Shabbat. It's not just any Shabbat. It's Shabbat of Rosh Hashana. Okay? Question. You had one? I spoke enough that you'll forget. I did it on purpose. Yeah.
But doesn't saying that they have to bring their shofar in front of the Beit Din also possibly promote someone carrying it?
No, yes, absolutely. But the idea is, like, if you're going to go to the Beit Din, you wouldn't drive to the Beit Din, right? If I told you that this year for shofar you have to go to the Beit Din Hagadol where the Sanhedrin is, you're not going to pull up in your car and say, "Oh, excuse me, where's the valet?" Right? You're not going to come to do that. You're going to Beit Din. You're going to be. You don't just go to the Sanhedrin. You don't go to Sanhedrin every day. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's Shabbat. It's a special day. You know you can't blow shofar at home, so you're going to go there. So it's a unique day. This is essentially what we're saying. When you tie it and you pin it somehow to the Sanhedrin, then you're not going to come to carry. But if this was something that every single person in every single town would do it, they would. We're not talking about we're not talking about every single person. We're talking about Yavneh, one city. By the way, let me just show on the screen. Hold on. I'm in the middle of a thought. 1 second. Okay, so just if for anyone who wants to see, there's a school, they call it Kerem B'Yavneh, Yeshivat Kerem B'Yavneh, KBY. You could see here is Yerushalayim, over here. After the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they went westward to this area called Kerem B'Yavneh. Anyone familiar with this area? Oh, actually on the map, they call this Yavneh. All right. Could be either one. Gan Yavneh. Okay. I guess there's different ones who wanna claim to fame. Ben Zakkai, Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Look at this. The whole area is named after Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai. South Chabad of Southeast Yavneh. This is Southeast Yavneh. Oh, then there was Yavneh is northwest of this. I guess somewhere here is Yavneh. Yavneh Beach. Oh, okay. So Yavneh is basically the entire Israel. Friendly Gan Yavneh. Everyone wants to be Yavneh. All right. Just to give you a sense of like sort of where it is, when they moved.
There you go, Yavneh.
Which one? This one. Yavneh.
Would they just name that town?
Yeah, exactly. It could be how they just put that name now. Anyway, this is like just sort of I wanted to show you. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so let's go. Yeah, sorry, Evan, what was your question? We didn't even. Yeah, okay.
Oh, so I was going to ask if in a town where there's a Sanhedrin, wouldn't there be?
Yavneh.
Yeah, or just in any town that's Sanhedrin in general, wouldn't they have an Arab in that town? So wouldn't it be okay there? Or is that like a new?
No, first of all, it's not in a town where there is Sanhedrin. The takana was for Yavneh. Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai made it specifically. It wasn't just like a hypothetical thing. Rabban Yochanan Ben Zakkai, after Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, he said, "Okay, we're going to do it in Yavneh also." But your question about an eruv is a much broader discussion because you could just say that for everything, right? If your whole concern is you're going to come to carry, why don't you just simply say, if you have an eruv, there's no issue, right? Because
the theoretical thing is something new.
What?
The eruv thing. It's not back then. They didn't have an eruv.
So, well, no, that's not. I mean, our understanding is that it was from the times of Shlomo HaMelech.
So they had
Or
eruv back then?
Yeah. Exactly. It's from the times of Shlomo HaMelech that we had an eruv. You make a bracha on it. You know, it's not the Gemara wouldn't institute a bracha. This is something that's very ancient, the concept of eruvin. But the answer is that you can't make an eruv through a reshut harabim. See, right now, our perception is that you just have an eruv and you're allowed to carry. The eruv is only permitting you to carry in an area that technically you're allowed to carry. Technically, from the Torah, there is, I don't think really we should go into this, but when you talk about different areas, there's a private area, like in your house, you're allowed to carry whatever you want. There is an area of a Reshut Harabim, which is a public domain that belongs, that you have people traveling through, and it's very public. You could put as many million eruvs as you want. You're not allowed to carry there. The Torah says you're not allowed to carry in a public domain. Putting a string around the area doesn't change anything.
Why is it?
But I'm in the middle. But there's an area that's in between that it's not technically considered a Reshut Harabim because it doesn't check off the requirements of a Reshut Harabim, which has specific requirements. It has to be certain width, has to have a certain amount of people going through, different opinions. But it's not technically a Reshut Harabim. So from the Torah, you are allowed to carry there. But Chachamim say this looks very similar to Reshut Harabim. So we're not going to let you carry it there unless you make it very clear that this is a different situation. And that's what the eruv is. So Reshut Yachid, you're allowed to carry, you don't need an eruv. Reshut Harabim, you're not allowed to carry, even if you have an eruv. The thing in between is called a Carmelit. And a Carmelit is technically not a Reshut Harabim. So technically, you would be allowed to carry there, but Chachamim said, we don't want you to carry there because it looks very similar to Reshut Harabim. It's just the street, so it looks very similar. So we're going to say, don't carry here unless you do something that shows that you're doing something different that you're not going to come to confuse it. So that's what the concept of the Eruv is. An Eruv, rabbis can't come and just uproot him inside the Torah. Hey, don't start a fire on Shabbat unless you put a string around the area and then you can start a fire on Shabbat. Doesn't work like that, right? So if you're not allowed to carry, you're not allowed to carry. But you technically, with the area of an Eruv, you're allowed to. So going back to your question, the concern was Reshut Rabim concern, where there's no Eruv doesn't help. Eruv doesn't help. Okay, good. Okay, very good. All right. Now let's finally do it. Okay, let's do it again. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna tells us again. We're now turning to 30a. Lamed Amarav ve'im bedin, together with the court. Mari ve'im bedin. What does it mean when Rav Huna requires that the shofar blowing be together ve'im bedin with the court? Bifnei bedin. Answer number one: in the presence of a court. I'm telling you now, there's going to be someone who says something else. But let's go with this: in the presence of the court. La pukeh shelo bifnei bedin. Coming to exclude that you can't do it if you're not in the presence of the court. Even if you're in Yavneh, even if you checked into the Hilton of the Southeast Yavneh Chabad, it doesn't matter. Even if you're in Yavneh, you have to be in front of the court. Dilo, okay? Mativ Rava. Rava wants to argue with him. Rava wants to say, I don't think you're right. I think that if you check into the local Marriott, that you would be allowed to, even if you're not going to the court. As long as you're in the city of Yavneh, I think you're going to be allowed to do it. Oh, what? Why? He says, I'll tell you why. Because look at what the Mishnah said. Ve'od zot hayta Yerushalayim mitira al Yavneh. The city of Yerushalayim was superior than Yavneh in one more way. What was that one more way that the city of Yerushalayim was superior? That even the surrounding areas, when it came to Yerushalayim, not just Jerusalem was allowed to blow the shofar, but even the surrounding areas. Whereas with Yavneh, it was only in Yavneh. So when the Mishnah says it, it says, and there's one more. So he's saying, "Mai ve'od zot." What do you mean, quote, there's one more thing? If you want to tell me the thing of the Mishnah, zot mi ve'ele, you should have said, this is how Jerusalem is superior than Yavneh. But it doesn't say this, it says also this, which means there's one more thing. So Ela, I'm going to tell you what it is. And based on what I say, you're wrong. What do I assume it is? The Yerushalayim tokin yachidin, in the city of Yerushalayim, anyone can blow the shofar. Uve Yavneh en tokin yachidin, but in Yavneh, it's only the shaliach tzibur. It's only the messenger of the court. When it came to Jerusalem, anyone who had a shofar was allowed to blow it. But in Yavneh, it was only the messenger of the court that was allowed. That's what I think. So this is the way I read the Mishnah. Way number one that Yerushalayim is better is that everyone could blow the shofar, whereas in Yavneh it was only one guy. It was only the shliach bedin. And number two, the surrounding cities. Okay, but now if I go by that, I'm going to start to argue. But the Gemara says, "Time out. Hold your horses, Rava." In the city of Yavneh, you couldn't have individuals blowing the shofar. It was only one person. There's no way that's the case. Why? We had a rabbi. His name was Rav Yitzchak. He was there. He was in Yavneh, and he then came to Bavel, telling us about the days when he was there. Imagine that. Someone comes and he says, I was in Yavneh. So tell us about it. Amar, ki misayem shlichad tzibura tekiya b'Yavneh. When the shliach tzibur, when the chazan would finish blowing his shofar in the court, what would happen? Lo shama inish kol uneh. A person couldn't even hear his own voice in his own ear, mikol tekuyaya deichada, because everyone was blowing the shofar. He's saying, you don't know how crazy it was in Yavneh. As soon as the chazan would finish blowing the shofar, people were blowing the shofar that you couldn't even hear your own voice. It was, everyone would pick up the shofar and everyone wanted to do it themselves. So what's his point? His point is that clearly in Yavneh, you had more than just one person blowing the shofar. So that can't be the way that Jerusalem was superior to Yavneh. Okay, so let's go back to the drawing board. Okay, now I'm just going to sort of put this in the framework of a chart because I like seeing the charts. Here, look at this. Yavneh Yerushalayim. Our Mishnah says also this is how it's superior. The bet in Yavneh it was the betin only. In Yerushalayim it was the surrounding cities too. So the question is, well, what's the first difference? Because if you say also this, what's the first difference? So option number one, it's only the betin messenger, and option number two is option number one is that in Yavneh was only the betin messenger, and Jerusalem was any individual person. The problem with this is, why is it that option one can't be the case? where in Yavneh it was only the Bet Din messenger. Why do we know that's not the case? Because we had testimony from Rav Yitzchak that he says, when I was in Yavneh, everyone was blowing the shofar. I couldn't even hear my own voice because everyone would start blowing the shofar. So we know it can't be option number one. So the Gemara is going to say, okay, let's go with option number two. Elalav. Here is this. This is our second option of how Jerusalem is superior to Yavneh. The Yerushalayim tokin ben mizman betin uben shelo ben mizman betin. In Jerusalem, they would blow the shofar all day long, whether the court was in session or the court was not in session, whether it was during the court hours or not during the court hours. Ube Yavneh, but in the city of Yavneh, bazman betin in, they would only blow the shofar during the court hours, during the first 6 hours. Shlo bizman betin lo, but not during the second half of the day. So he just said how the difference between Jerusalem and Yavneh is the time that you do it. Bizman betin mihatokin, but during the time of the court hours in Yavneh, they would blow the shofar ba'afilu shelo b'fnei betin, even you're not in front of the court. So he is saying, you know, the difference between Jerusalem and Yavneh is it's the time. It's not that you physically have to be there. Remember, this answer, Rav Huna said his statement of ve'im bedin. You want to blow the shofar? It has to be with the court. What does with the court mean? So answer that we're saying now is with the court means in the presence of the court. He says, no, it doesn't mean in the presence of the court. It means during the hours of the court. And I introduced this already. That he's arguing and saying that's what it's talking about. The Gemara says, no. But you don't have to say that. The ilu b'Yerushalayim took in ben b'fnei bedin ben shelo b'fnei bedin. In Jerusalem, they would blow the shofar in front of the court or not in front of the court. Uveyavneh b'fnei bedin in shelo b'fnei bedin lo. In Yavneh, they would only blow in the presence of the court. Period. In other words, this flow that we had, we tried to attack this opinion and we didn't. Let me show it to you in the chart and then I'll explain it. Okay. So remember, Rav Huna tells us that the shofar blowing must be done with the bedin. What does Rav Huna mean? Answer number one is it's in the presence of the bedin physically. The Gemara wants to say that can't be the case because, and as we went through it, that it's based on how we understand how the Mishnah is being read. Our Mishnah tells us that Yerushalayim is better than Yavneh in two ways. The first way that our Mishnah tells us is that the surrounding cities also blow the shofar. Okay, what's the other way? We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. Maybe you're going to tell me that in Jerusalem anyone can blow the shofar, but in Yavneh only one person can blow the shofar? Can't be. Why? Rav Yitzchak, exactly. Very good. Rav Yitzchak gave us testimony that when he was in Yavneh, everyone was doing it. So that can't be a difference between Jerusalem and Yavneh. Okay, the second one. What the Gemara is saying is, it's talking about the hours. In Yavneh, it was all day long. Sorry, in Yerushalayim, it was all day long, whereas in Yavneh, it was just the first 6 hours of the day when the court was in session. The Gemara says, no, I disagree with you. What it is that in Yavneh, they would do it in the presence of Bet Din. In Jerusalem, in the presence or not in the presence, it wouldn't matter. Which means this difference that we're saying is exactly what, the fact that we're in the presence of Bet Din, this is exactly what Rav Huna is telling us. Okay? One maybe okay, that's a good color. In the presence of Bet Din, in Yavneh, Yerushalayim, even not in the presence of Bet Din. And that is in line with what Rav Huna tells us, and that's going to be the first opinion, and we're going to stop there. Now we're going to get into the second opinion. So Rav Huna essentially tells us this cryptic statement. He gave us a reply, Rama. The way I said it before was, Rav Huna replied to someone's WhatsApp message, but he didn't do the swipe reply. So we don't know what he was talking about. He just said, with the court. With the court, who's he talking to? What is he talking about? With the court, what does that mean? The first answer means in the presence of the court. It has to be done in front of the court. Okay? Now let's get to the second one. The second one says, no. He wasn't commenting on our Mishnah. He was commenting on something else that has to do with Yom Kippur. And there he said, with the Bet Din. And then it means something else. Okay? So let's go ahead and see it. Some say that this comment that Rav Huna made was really responding to something else. On the fact that it says in the Torah, there's a Braita that tells us, it says in the Torah, Beyom HaKippurim, on Yom Kippur, Ta'aviru shofar, blow the shofar, V'chol artzechem, in your entire land. On Yom Kippur, you have to blow the shofar in your entire land. How is that even possible? How is it possible that on Yom? By the way, when I say Yom Kippur, which Yom Kippur am I talking about? Yovel. Right? We don't blow the shofar on a regular Yom Kippur. You only blow the shofar on the on Yom Kippur of the Yovel year, which is how often? Every 50th year. Very good. So, but the Torah says on the 50th year, on Yom Kippur, you blow the shofar in your entire land. How do you do it in the entire land? Who's going to do it in the entire land? So it must mean, the Gemara is going to tell us, it must be that everyone has to blow the shofar. How else are you going to get the shofar in the entire land? It must be that everyone has to blow the shofar. That's what this Braita tells us. That everyone has to blow the shofar. Comes Rabuna and says, Amar Rabuna now swipes in the WhatsApp a message and he says, Vein Bedin, with the courts. What does that mean with the courts? Vein Bedin, my Vein Bedin. What do you mean with the courts? At first we say, you can't mean in the presence of the courts. Why can't it mean in the presence of the court? Because everyone's doing it. And so you don't have courts everywhere. There are many small villages that don't have courts. There's many areas that don't have courts. So first what we're going to say, the Braita says, you have to blow the shofar in your entire land on Yom Kippur of Yovel. And what does that mean? Everyone has to blow the shofar. Rav Huna raises and says, with the court. What do you mean with the court? That can't mean in front of the court. Why can't it mean in front of the court? Because you're talking about everyone. It's not possible for everyone to be in front of the court. They can't go there. It's not possible. Everyone is not going to be available. So rather,
This is talking about Yom Kippur, where our Mishnah is talking about Rosh Hashana. Why do we use the Braita?
no, there's no proof here. Time out. This has nothing to do with our Mishnah. Remember, Rav Huna said a statement. Rav Huna's statement was with the court. So according to one opinion, he was commenting on our Mishnah. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in our Mishnah made a takana that you have to blow the shofar in Yavneh. He raises his hand or he swipes and he says with the court. This one has nothing to do with our Mishnah.
That statement in the Mishnah that he made for the court has to do with right?
Something completely unrelated. They were talking about Yom Kippur. They were talking about Yovel. They were talking about how everyone has to blow the shofar. And Rav Huna says, "Hold your horses! You want to blow the shofar on Yom Kippur? Everyone? Okay, it has to be with the court."
It doesn't even apply.
So it's not that it doesn't apply. It's that Rav Huna just put this message in the WhatsApp chat when there's 6 conversations going on. They're like, "What, Rav Huna? We don't know what you're talking about." One person says you're talking about your Mishnah Masechet Rosh Hashana that has to do with Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and Yavneh. The other one says that it says you have to talk about Yovel, blowing the shofar in Yovel, that everyone has to do it, and then he raises his hand. What are you talking about? Okay, you know what? It's not that confusing. You know, sometimes it happens in WhatsApp. Someone says something. He's like 4 conversations, like Earth to so and so. But here, obviously, the difference here is that Rav Huna said this statement, and there's in the schools there was 2 different versions of what he was talking about. He made this like blockbuster statement that was a big deal, but it just like different people had different opinions as to what he was talking about. So yeah, maybe I should have taken a step back to clarify. According to the second version, Rav Huna's statement is talking about something completely different. Based on that, we're going to learn some important rules. Okay? So let's do it. On this statement that says everyone has to blow the shofar, Amar Rav Huna ve'im betin. Rav Huna says with the court. Mai ve'im betin. What does it mean with the court? Bisman betin. The only thing you can say is it means during the time that the court is in session. La pukesh lo bisman betin de lo. That comes to exclude not in the second half of the day. So what would this mean? This would mean that every single person on Yom Kippur of the Yovel year, everyone would blow the shofar. But we would tell them, Rabotai, gentlemen, it has to be in the first half of the day. Why the first half of the day? Because that's when the court is in session. So what? You're not allowed to carry. It's Yom Kippur. You have to make sure not to carry. So to remind yourself not to carry, do this when the court is open, so that hopefully that'll give you some fear in your mind. That's how we try to help people to remember not to do something wrong. Do it with the court in your mind. So Mativ Rava says, let's get through this. Mativ Rava says, hold on a second. I don't like this. Okay? He says as follows. Tekiyat, and the Gra takes out Rosh Hashana here. It's fine. Tekiyat Yovel doche et Shabbat bigvulin. So again, there's different versions. I'm going with the version of the Gra because there's some nuanced reasons, and this is commenting on Yom Kippur, so it's fine. The blowing the shofar of the Yovel will go ahead and be doche Shabbat. You're allowed to break Shabbat to blow the shofar of the Yovel. Ish ubeto. What does ish ubeto mean? A man and his house. Very good. So on Yom Kippur, when you want to blow the shofar, you're allowed to every man and his house. What does his house mean?
His family.
His family. Okay. So what does his family mean? Okay. So his baba is also a man. Meaning, if I am a man and I'm required to blow the shofar, my father is also a man. So what the Gemara is saying is, when you say ish ubito, every man and his house, you wouldn't say every man and his father because he's already a man, right? So every man and his house must be talking about someone else. Who's it talking about? His wife, right? Because if you say that it's talking about another man, well, that's the first part, right? Man and his house. So if you're going to say it's a man and his father, well, no, then he's the man part already. So who's his house talking about? It's talking about his wife. That's what we think. But we have a problem. My ishu beto. What do you mean that on Yom Kippur, Yovel, everyone blows the shofar, man and his house? Why? What does that mean? Maybe it means a man and his wife. Is a woman obligated in shofar? Woman isn't obligated in shofar. Why not, Rama? It is a positive mitzvah that is time bound. That the mitzvah of blowing the shofar in Yovel comes on the day of Yom Kippur. It's based on a certain time of the day, of a certain time of the year, and it's a positive commandment. And any positive mitzvah that women are obligated in, that's time bound, nashim p'turot. So then that can't be what it means. When it says that Yom Kippur, everyone blows the shofar, every man in his house, doesn't mean a man and his wife. His wife's not obligated. So what does it mean, every man in his house? Look at this. Elalav ish bebeto. A man in his house, which means don't step out of your house. The announcement that was given is, when you're blowing the shofar, you need everyone to blow the shofar. Remember, Rav Huna is commenting on the fact that on Yom Kippur, everyone is blowing the shofar, and he says, Ve'im bedin, during the court hours, but he's saying, not just during the court hours, do it in your house. I don't want you to leave your house. That's what this braita is, the way we're learning this braita, means ish bebeito, each man in his house. But then, once you're telling me it's in my house, what difference does it make if it's during the court hours or not? Yeah, so you could assume that it would be any time of the day. If I'm doing my own house, what difference does it make if I do it 9 a.m. or 3 p.m.? The Gemara says, no, I'm going to require you to do it in your house during the time of the court hours, not because you're going to go to the court, but because that'll be a reminder. It'll serve as a reminder to you so that you don't come to carry and leave your house. Okay. Mativ Rav Sheshet. We'll go through it and then we'll do a recap. Mativ Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet now gives another contradiction. And I think this is, okay, we're almost there. Shaveh HaYovel, the Rosh Hashana, la Tekiyah v'la Barachot. The year of the Yovel, or the shofar of the Yovel, is the same as in Rosh Hashanah. We've actually learned this line like 3 or 4 times already. The tekiyot of Rosh Hashanah is the same as the tekiyot of Yovel. The way we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is the same that we blow it on Yom Kippur. And also, the shofar that you're supposed to use, according to that first line of the Mishnah of Shabbat of Rosh Hashanah, is the same as Yovel. Why, Mr. Besali? Do you know why? Why is it that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah and the shofar of Yovel have to be the same? There's a reason I'm asking you. There's a Gezerah Shava. Very good, very good. Yeah, you can reverse engineer the answer. It's Gezerah Shava. It says by Yovel, Ta'avir Shofar, blow the shofar, and it says by Rosh Hashanah, it tells us also Yom Teruah, and it says, oh, you have a word over here, you have a word over there, you connect it. The shofar blowing of Yom Kippur and the shofar blowing of Rosh Hashanah is the same. So that's what this line is. Shaveh HaYovel, the Rosh Hashana, Yovel and Rosh Hashana are the same, the Tekiyah, for the way you blow the shofar, the Barachot, and also for the Musaf. The Musaf is the same prayer. Ela, here's the difference. Shebe Yovel, Tok'in, Ben Bevedin, Shekitshu Bo Et HaChodesh. When it comes to Yovel, you can blow the shofar, whether you're at the court that sanctifies the new moon, or a court that doesn't sanctify the new moon. And another difference is, when it comes to Yovel, everyone has to blow the shofar. So now we're saying that the shofar of Yovel and Rosh Hashanah is the same. There's two differences. Difference number one, the court that they used the times of Rosh Hashanah had to be the Supreme Court, that they would sanctify the new moon, but not for Yovel. And the other difference is, Yovel, everyone would do it. Rosh Hashanah, you wouldn't have everyone doing it. Okay? But Rosh Hashanah, lo yehu tokin elo bebet din shekitshu bo et hachodesh, ve'en kol yachid v'yachid yechayav litkoah. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, number one, you can't do it if it's a court that doesn't sanctify the new moon, which means it's not the Sanhedrin. Okay, we'll go with that opinion for now. And also, not everyone is required to blow the shofar. What does it mean that not every individual has to blow the shofar? Do you mean to tell me that individuals are not allowed to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Right? Because we just made a statement. Here's the difference between Yovel and Rosh Hashanah. Yovel, individuals have to blow the shofar. Rosh Hashanah, individuals don't have to. What are you telling me? That individuals are not allowed to? Could that be the case that individuals are not allowed to blow the shofar in Yavneh? Evan? Why is that? Why is it not possible? Because Rabbi Yitzchak gave us testimony that in the city of Yavneh, everyone would blow the shofar. It would be impossible to hear your own voice. You see, you do the same thing there, right? You reverse engineer from the fact that I ask you. What happens if I don't ask you? I have to. Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you without asking you. I don't know how I'm gonna do that. Okay, V'haki ata Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, because when Rabbi Yitzchak came, Amar ki avam misayem shlichad tzibura tekiyah b'Yavneh. When the Chazan would finish blowing the shofar in the city of Yavneh, lo shama inish kol uneh mikol tokaya dichadaah. Individual wouldn't even be able to hear his own voice in his own ear from the sounds of all the shofars. Elalav. What must it mean when I say that individuals blow the shofar in by Yom Kippur, but not by Rosh Hashanah? Dilu by Yovel tokin ben mizman bedin ben shelo bizman bedin. The difference is Yom Kippur they could blow the shofar at all hours of the day. Rosh Hashanah bizman bedin in bizman shelo bizman bedin lo. Whereas when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's only during the time that the court is in session. But what you learn from here is that when it comes to Yovel, it would be all day long without the requirement that it's only when the court is in session. And if you say that, we have a problem. Because this whole opinion of Rav Huna was commenting on the Yovel and saying it's only during the court hours. Lo, so the Gemara says, no, it's not a problem. It's only during the time when the court is in session. This is how we mean to say it. By Yovel, during the time of the Yovel, Bizman Bedin, when the court is in session, Tokin Ben Bifnei Bedin, Ben Shelo Bifnei Bedin, you would be allowed to blow the shofar whether you're in front of the court or not. So when it comes to Yovel, it has to be when the court is in session, but it doesn't have to be in the presence of the court. The Rosh Hashanah, but on Rosh Hashanah, Tokin Bizman Bedin, it has to be when the court is in session, Ubifnei Bedin, and when you're in the presence of the court. Itmar Nameh. This is another statement says the same thing. Amar V'chia bar Gamda, Amar Yosef ben Shaul, Amar Rebbe. This opinion is quoting Rebbe. Ein tokin ela kol zman shebedin yoshvin. You're only allowed to do it during the time that the court is in session. So essentially, what we say now is, according to this opinion, that on Rosh Hashanah you need both requirements. You need, number one, to be in front of the court, and number two, you have to be during the time that the court is in session. And you might say, well, if I'm in front of the court, then obviously I'm going to be at the time that the court is in session. But the difference is that when it comes to Yovel, you do it during the time that the court is in session, but not in front of the court. So both Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah has to be the first 6 hours of the day. Yom Kippur, you don't have to be in front of the court, whereas Rosh Hashanah, you have to be in front of the court. Okay? Yes,
You didn't need all this stuff. The Torah clearly stated on Yom Kippur, everyone has to blow the shofar in their land. No?
correct.
What was all this commentary?
Okay, very good. Okay, the answer is exactly. This line, okay, you said that, right? But the Torah says you have to build a shofar, right? But Rav Huna says with the courts. Rav Huna, that's all Rav Huna told us. That he just put a comment on your statement that says on the Torah tells us Yom Kippur you have to blow the shofar. Rav Huna says, "Alo, with the court." Okay, what does with the court mean? So what we're saying is it means during the time that the court is in session. So obviously, this has to be a rabbinic requirement, as you're saying. The Torah says blow the shofar. Rav Huna is coming and telling you, but the rabbis are going to tell you, I want it to be during the first 6 hours of the day. Is that in your house? So that's what this is all about. Now, you're right. This Gemara seems a bit confusing, but that's essentially what we're getting at. And that's why I just want to share my screen again to my table, my chart at the beginning. Rav Huna said the shofar blowing must be done with the Beit Din. What does Rav Huna mean? So the first one says he's commenting in our Mishnah, and based on the fact that he's commenting on our Mishnah, we understand him to mean that it has to be in the presence of the Beit Din. The other one says no, he's actually commenting on Yom Kippur law, Yovel law, and from the fact that he's commenting there, it means during the first 6 hours of the day. And as you said, in his own house. Okay, but at the end of the day, you're going to learn from the two of these together, and this is going to be a requirement. Now, well, how do we hold the halacha? And there's different opinions. Some say you need both, some say you don't. But essentially, I think what we say for halacha is that you definitely have to be in front of the court. Bifnei Beit Din. It has to be in front of the court, and once you're saying it's in front of the court, then it has to be during the time that the court is in session also. Otherwise, there's no court, right? I guess you could technically say, what if I'm in the courthouse without the court being in session? Potentially. But for now, since this only applies during the times that we blow the shofar on Shabbat, which we don't do anymore, unless you're Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. You guys remember that story from last week? Or this is the time of the Yovel, which we don't do. So who exactly we hold like? I guess it's more of a moot point for today. But Be'ezrat Hashem, one day there will be a time when on Yovel, Yom Kippur, we will be blowing the shofar. And not just that, everyone has to, and you have to do it in your own home. And I know Rama is working very hard to learn how to blow the shofar. Rama, you don't have to bring it out. I trust you. Okay, here we go. Andy, can you hear the voice in your ear? Can you hear your own voice in your... You say you can. Yeah. Okay, Rama, you gotta do yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I want to finish this up. I just want to get us to the next Mishnah. 3 more lines. Okay. Now this you love this type of a question, because when you ask this type of a question, it's like, all right, I don't know exactly, but let's see. By Rabbi Zera asked the question. According to the opinion that says you need to do it during the time that the court is in session. Okay? By Rabbi Zera asked the question. Nin aru la'amod v'lo amdu. Let's say the court is ready to get up, they just didn't get up yet. But they get ready to get up. It's like, okay. It's like sometimes we have this in Shir, like you close the Gemara and we're just like chatting, saying, oh, next week this might go on. Oh, who's here? Who's around next week? What's the next Masechet you think we should learn? Oh, I'm going away next week. This type of thing. But I already closed my book. So this is what he's talking about. Nin aru la'amod, they're getting ready to stand up, but they didn't get up yet. So they're still there. You consider that still in session? Mahu. Okay, it's like, why? I don't know. Very interesting question. Bedin yoshvin ba'inan, do you need them to be sitting? V'ha'ikan, they're sitting. So they're still in session. Or dilma, or maybe you're going to say, Zman Betin Ba'inan, you need the time when the Betin is in court, in session, and they're actually dealing with court. Velekan, you don't have it. Okay, so which one is it? The answer is Teku. We don't know. What is this might be our first Teku. Yeah. Did we ever have a Teku before? We've never had a Teku before. Wow. 6 years, 5 years? We never had a Teku before. Wow, okay. I don't know if we have to check the Kami's quarter if it's there. So Teku is basically saying, I don't know. It's basically saying, I give up. Yeah. So they leave this question as unresolved. Now, What does that mean? What do you do? So some of the things that they say is Teku stands for Rashi Tevot, Taf Yud Kuf Vav Tishbi Yavneh Kushiot v'Terutzot, which means Tishbi, who's Eliyahu Tishbi. It's talking about Eliyahu Navi. Tishbi means from that area. It's Eliyahu Tishbi. Eliyahu will come. Yetaretz will answer. Kushiot v'ibaot. He'll come and he'll answer all of our questions. Basically, it's saying we have to wait until Eliyahu Navi comes and gives us an answer. Okay, so what? Teku. That's it. Teku really what it means is like let it stand. Okay, it means like to stand. Like leave it there. Yeah, just
Rabbi.
pin it. Comes to Mashiach. Hold on 1 second. So hold it until Mashiach comes. Eliyahu Navi comes and answers the questions. However, practically speaking, what do we do? So this is where we have different opinions giving different halachot. Here's a perfect example. In this example, the Rambam is lenient. The Rambam is basically says, yeah, it still counts. They're there, it still counts. So the halacha, he'll say it's fine. Whereas the Meiri is strict. The Meiri says, like once they close the books, even though they didn't get up, the halacha, it's too late. So why? It's different opinions. But their opinion is not based on the Gemara, because the Gemara doesn't give us one. The Rambam has his own reason. The Rambam says, well, the whole requirement is a rabbinical requirement to begin with. Because rabbinically, from the Torah, I have to blow the shofar on Yom Kippur. There's no time limit as to when I have to do it during the time the court is in session. The rabbis instituted that you have to do it during the time that the court is in session. Here I have an area that is a gray zone. I'm not sure what it is. Safek d'Rabbanan la'akel, says the Rambam. It's a rabbinic thing. Since it's a rabbinic thing, I'm going to be lenient and I'll go ahead and I'll let you do it during that small window. Whereas the other one says, no, when you're not sure about something, you might come to do something wrong. The rabbis made an institution. You have to follow it. So it's not clearly part of the institution, so you can't do it. Different opinions, but the question is still a valid question, and I think it's the first time we did a teku. Very good, very good. Teku is sometimes we just don't know the answer, so we say put it aside, keep moving. Maybe next time we'll get Eliyahu Navi will come and give us an answer. Okay, there's a question.
Rabbi, can I say something interesting? In Israel, the soccer is very popular, so in soccer there can be tie, so very normal. It's a nitzachon, you win, or if it's a tie, it's called teko in the league.
I know that.
Yeah.
A tie?
Like basketball, we don't have such a thing, right? In football in America, very rarely there's a tie. But in soccer, there's a lot. Like every third game, there's a tie. Very normal in Israeli league, they call a tie teko.
Very good. So they call it a draw, right? It's a draw. Right? They call it a draw.
No
So
winner.
in Israel, they call it a teku. Eliyahu Navi is going to tell us who the real winner is. Basically. Very interesting. Okay, yeah, that's exactly it. We don't know. There's no clear, definitive answer here. Teku, tishbi, ya'aneh, kushiot, v'terutzot. What do you have? There is a teku in Tanit. Which one? Just read it. You have the Hebrew or? Okay. Something about bread. Okay, so I think the topic there, wow. I think the topic there was if there were certain times that if the field and the grain of the field would start to become ruined, then you would start having fasts because it means there's some sort of a plague coming. So I'm pretty sure there it said they give you a measurement. It said the measurement of the grain is that if the field was hit, kemlopi tanur, like the size of an oven, then you start fasting. So the Gemara says, do you mean the literal size of how big an oven opening is, like a 2x2, or do you mean the amount of grain that you could turn into flour and stick it in the oven and have it fit? The Gemara says, I'm not sure. I don't know. Take it, right? So I think that might be it. I have to look it up, make sure I got the details right, but I'm pretty sure that was very good. Okay. You search the word take. Very good. Okay, let's finish up. Last one. Okay, remember, Justin, you said it. What is the way that Jerusalem is superior to Yavneh, according to our Mishnah?
The bordering towns.
Correct.
What?
Bordering towns. Towns
In Yerushalayim, the surrounding towns would also blow the shofar. Not just in Yerushalayim could they blow the shofar, but in the towns around also.
Yavneh, no.
But in Yavneh, only where the court was. Okay? Only in front of the court, by the court. But in Jerusalem, it wasn't just Jerusalem, it was also the surrounding towns. However, our Mishnah said some words. Let me just scroll up to show you what the Mishnah says. And then we're going to like dissect each and every one. So I'm just going to read to you. I'm going back a page to 29b. Here. Shekol ir shehi ro'ah, any city that can see Jerusalem, v'shomat, and could hear Jerusalem, ukrova, and is close to Jerusalem, v'yechala lavo, that could come there, tokin, they would also blow the shofar. So it didn't just say surrounding cities. It said cities that can see it, hear it, and come to it. So why do you come and say that? That's what our final Gemara on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph is going to tell us. Before we get to the next Mishnah, scrolling down, here we go. This is how Jerusalem was superior to Yavneh. Ro'ah, a city that could see it, prat liyoshevet benacha. This is coming to exclude, meaning you're going to need all of these. You need to be able to see it and hear it and be able to get to it. So what does that mean? Let's say you're very close, but you're sitting in a valley. So Jerusalem is a very mountainous area. It's high up. Let's say you live very close to Yerushalayim, but it's down very deep that you can't see it. You wouldn't be allowed to, right? Prat liyoshevet benachal. It's coming to exclude a city that sits deep in a valley, which one can hear but cannot see Jerusalem. They wouldn't be allowed to blow the shofar. Shomat, a city that hears it, prat liyoshevet berosh har. That's coming to exclude the reverse case. Let's say you're very close to Yerushalayim where you can see it because you're on a mountain. But you're so high on a mountain that when they're blowing the shofar in Yerushalayim, you can't hear it. So you can see it, but you can't hear it. Not included. So when I say that you have to be able to see it and you have to be able to hear it, it's telling you that you need both of them. If you could hear it, but you're very low that you don't see the city of Yerushalayim, doesn't work. If you're very high that you could see it, but you can't hear it because you're on a high mountain, also doesn't work. You wouldn't be allowed to blow the shofar. You have to be so close that you're like part of the city, that all of your senses are part of it. Krova, you're close to it. Prat liyoshevet chutz latchum. When I say that you're close to it, it means that you have to be within the Tchum Shabbat, which means from the Torah you would be allowed to walk. Remember, we spoke about Tchum Shabbat before. It's about 2,000 amot outside of your city walls. If you're so far that you're not allowed to walk, now we're putting a distance measurement around it. You have to be within the Tchum Shabbat. So even if you could see it and you could hear it, but you're outside of 2,000 amot or whatever the physical distance is, then you wouldn't be allowed to. And the last thing that our Mishnah said is that you can make it there on Shabbat. Prat l'mafsek la nahara. That's coming to exclude if there's a river in between you. Which means, let's say you're Yerushalayim and there's a river and there's another city. You can see it. You can hear it. You're within the 2,000 amot distance, but the only way to get there is to go on a boat. You're also not allowed to, because you're not allowed to go on the boat on Shabbat. You're not allowed to get onto the boat, get off the boat on Shabbat. So now what we're saying is, these are the 4 requirements or 4 limitations. And when I tell you bordering cities were allowed to blow the shofar outside of Yerushalayim, yeah, but you have to be able to see it, which means not in a valley. You have to be able to hear it, which means not on a mountain. You have to be able to walk to it, which means you're close enough that you're not outside of the Tchum Shabbat, meaning within 2,000 amot of the city borders, and that you're able to get there without going on a boat, which means it's coming to exclude if there's a river in between you. Very interesting, because I always wondered, why don't you just give me the names of the cities? Let's look at where Yerushalayim here is on the map. If I look, I know, but I mean, Yerushalayim has been there from the times of David HaMelech. Nothing's changed. It's been our home forever.
Around it.
No, I know, but do you see any rivers here? Any rivers? No water. So it's just more of a. Okay,
It's
where?
gotta be water, because it's not a mountain, so water flows downstream somewhere.
What's this? What's this? What's this? Ain Kerem Agricultural School.
So basically that one town behind that. body-
Maybe. I'm just saying it could be that our Mishnah is like just more putting the theoretical rules in place because maybe one day someone will form a river. It's possible. They do make like these man-made canals. Maybe it's talking about that type of thing. But I was just when I was learning this is like coming to exclude someone who's in a mountain. Is there really a mountain so close to Jerusalem?
There's a note here, but it's a very, even a town that met all the other conditions was not viewed as part of Jerusalem's environs of its inhabitants needed a boat to reach Jerusalem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so.
It doesn't say anything about.
Okay. All right. Anyway, next time, just to give you a preview of next time's class, we're going to talk about different things that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made takanot. So we learned a new takana that he made. Our Mishnah tells us that during the times of Beit HaMikdash, they would blow the shofar in Yerushalayim on Shabbat, but not anywhere else. And then after the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, he said, we're going to do it in Yavneh also. And according to another opinion, he said, we're going to do it anywhere where there's a corpse. Okay? There's going to be something else he did for Sukkot, and there's going to be just something else that he did for the mitzvah of Kemach Yashan and Kemach Hadash. These are two things that he had done after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one during the times of the destruction, and he made a bunch of decrees. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll learn about that next week. Okay? Azak Baruch, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.